Leatherette.
It's London and it's really, really busy. We're on our way to go and see Daniel Miller, who is a British-born, London-born British music producer. Daniel Miller is best known for his work with Depeche Mode and the label Mute Records, which he owns. As an advocate of synthesizers since the late 70s, when he released a single as The Normal called Warm Leatherette, influencing a generation and a host, and marking a point in time when synthesizers became more than just electronic music, but an instrument of production and influence on modern music.
But I knew somebody who had one, and I had a bit of a go of his before I decided which one to buy. And a few things I particularly liked about it was they had a repeat. All the names for all the module devices within the synthesizer are different to the ones that people use now. But there was one called repeat, which meant if you pressed a key, it would just have a rhythmic repeat. It's kind of meant as an accompaniment instrument, you know, to sit on top of an organ so you can play a little melody, a flute sound or something like that. It was just on a table, you know, like an alto with a tape recorder there and the synthesizer there and some speakers, and that was it really. And it was great, and it was liberating getting it home that first day and setting it up. The kind of the liberating feeling of being able to work on, of being able to overdub and not be with a band. I was playing guitar at the time, and I'm a very bad guitarist, and it was very hard for me to express to the other guys what I wanted to play. I really wanted to make these more electronic sounds, and I really couldn't do that very well with the guitar in the way that I wanted to. When you're trying to make your own sound, it's not so much how many synthesizers you have, it's more about how well you know those instruments. It's more about attitude than sound, because I didn't sound anything like a punk rock record, the record that I made, but in my head it did. And I thought punk rock was kind of great for a moment, but then actually what punk rock was just sped up, pub rock mostly, and sometimes with great lyrics. But musically it wasn't really going anywhere for me. And so with a monophonic synthesizer, first of all you can't play chords, which is great. That's why I like monophonic synthesizer. I'm not big on chords. And yeah, you could just do, it was much more about direct connection between, as I said, between your head and the tape, that I really liked, that kind of interface idea.
Warm Leatherette.
You know, I was living in London, and there were people all around the country and independently doing their own music. People like, you know, Cabaret Voltaire and OMD and you know, people like that. But I didn't think they were really related. There was no connection between them. As far as maybe in Sheffield between people like Human League and Cabaret Voltaire, there was maybe a bit of a connection because they were in the same city. But I think that it was a kind of very specific moment in history that sort of triggered those activities, really. We were all roughly the same age, you know, early to mid-20s. All those people had loved like things like Can and Kraftwerk and Neu, the very German kind of sounding things rather than the prog rock kind of synth music. Then punk happened, and that energized everybody into the fact they could actually, maybe in that world, they could actually do something. And then the cheap synthesizers came on the market. So it was all very much it could only really have happened at that particular moment, because there's various historical events that the cosmos brought in at some, you know, brought together, really.
Warm Leatherette.
Generally speaking, it's good to have loudspeakers in the studio, as a general rule. They help. And you have to be able to trust those speakers, because you're making sounds all the time, making subtle changes all the time. It's really important that the monitors that you use, that you're hearing what you're doing properly, and that so you know, you don't want to be second guessing the speakers all the time. You just want to know that what's coming out of the speakers is what is right and what you're playing or mixing. So that's very important. Monitoring is extremely important. But some guys have like 4 different sets of monitors up to switch between monitors to see how it sounds on different monitors. That's not the way I mean, I will occasionally do that, but generally I like to stick to one set of speakers for the whole project, and trust those, know those speakers inside out, and trust them, and know what I'm hearing is is going to sound like on all sorts of other systems. You know, because that's the most important thing. I think for me, chopping between different speakers, I just get more confused. So I'd rather have one pair of speakers that I trust, and then occasionally check on a very small speaker or a very big speaker. When I was working with Depeche, anyway, we only really used the big speakers, the big studio monitors, built-in ones. You know, once we knew we were happy with the mix, and then we would just sit back and enjoy it on the big speakers. I find it's very misleading sometimes. So if you start very quietly, you turn it up a tiny bit and it sounds really loud, even though it's not loud and there's no distortion on it. And if I'm just messing around with a banging techno track, yeah, I'll turn it up. But if I'm just working on sounds, I don't need to hear them very loud. I just need to hear them clearly. That's the most important thing. Because there's so many, as you can see, I haven't counted how many knobs or buttons there are in the studio, but there's so many variations. You want to be able to hear what you're doing, really. You know, you really want to be able to hear what subtle changes that are happening. So it's important. That's for clarity is more important. I'm not one of those guys who likes to switch between monitors all the time. There are lots of pairs of monitors in the studio. I might do that at the end of a mix, just to double check. But during the mix, I would just pretty much only work on one set of monitors. Good monitor is the monitor that you know. Really, the monitor that you've lived with for a long time. And I don't know about curves and holes and blah and the frequencies. I just know if this sounds good on these monitors, it's going to sound good on my speakers here, at my domestic speakers, on my headphones, on all different ones. And the ones I happen to like and know extremely well are Dynaudio BM15s, which, for as long as I can remember, we've had those in the studio. And I've got them, still have them in our studio, and I have in my other studio in Berlin. And I just know what it's going to, and if I play something through there, and I can immediately know what's wrong with it or what's good about it. The space that you're in is very important. It's got to be a space that you feel comfortable in as a musician, as a producer. I think it gets more difficult as you have more stuff. Try and limit the number of decisions you have to make. I think that's very important. Focus on the core of the song or the core of the piece of music that you're making. Don't just add stuff. You know, it's so easy to add things now that you really get lost, you know, and I don't think that's a very positive it's not a very musical way of working, I think. Don't use presets. Don't record too much stuff. Limit your number of tracks. But my bugbear is don't use presets. You know, I really think, some great presets on some of these synths, and because they're great, everybody else is going to use them. I think it's really important to have your own signature sound if you're making electronic music. The only advice I could give to somebody who wants to start a label today is that they have 100% passion for it. There's no other option than them in life, you know. That's the same for a musician as well. Because if you've got a qualification, I could be a lawyer, I could be a doctor. You'll end up being a lawyer or a doctor because it's too tough running a record company. It's my hobby, and I don't really make music. I just make noise in here and make sounds, and without any end product in sight, which I think is really healthy. It's all about being in the moment. It's not about making something for recording something. I do record stuff sometimes in here just as kind of source material for something else if I think I've got a really good sound or a good rhythm. But really, it's just about the moment, this environment for me.